One of the great difficulties we face as people of faith is coming to terms with what to do. In a certain kind of way, this may be a Western problem, and it may be a modern problem. We're always casting about, trying to figure out what we're supposed to do. I think it relates to our anxiety, the anxiety we experience as people. When we're quiet for just a moment, or when we're still for too long, we start to hear those quiet voices. We start to see our imperfections. We start to identify our shortcomings. And let's face it, we don't really care for that experience. So we fill every waking moment with some kind of activity, all to keep the quiet voice of reality, of honesty, of truth at bay. But I wonder if we were still and quiet from time to time. I wonder if we could engage those thoughts, those imperfections, that awareness of our shortcomings. I wonder if we could engage them in, let's say, 10 minutes of silence every day. If we could engage them, let those thoughts enter our minds, tag them, and let them pass through. And let God, with open arms, receive them, sanctify them, transform them, and transform us into the people that we are created to be. In the Gospels, Jesus takes ample time to get out of the busyness of the world, to get out of the busyness of his ministry, and pull the disciples aside and pray. Jesus takes his most intimate disciples, Peter, James, and John, and he pulls them out of the busy world, and he takes them to the mountain to pray. We don't have a sense of the content of Jesus' prayer. Something incredible happened during that time. We see Moses and Elijah, and they appear as symbols and vehicles of divine communication to Jesus and to the disciples that witness these events because they're attentive and stay awake. Moses and Elijah there function as go-betweens, messengers, sharing something of God's design for the rest of Jesus' ministry. They become a channel of communication, and God uses that channel. And we know Moses, right? If we don't remember Moses from the Old Testament, then surely we remember the movies that give us a picture of what Moses must have been like. He's the second founder of Judaism. He leads Israel from slavery to freedom. And Moses goes up the mountain, as we just heard, himself, and engages God in a personal way. Moses receives the law, the foundation of Israel's side of the relationship with God. Moses sees God and listens and is changed. Now Elijah, he's a little more obscure. He's the prophet in the history of Israel. His very name means Yahweh is God. And much of Elijah's prophetic career is spent proclaiming the reality and singularity of the God of Israel over and against pagan rivals. According to the book of the Kings, Elijah raises the dead. brings fire down from the sky, ascends into heaven in a whirlwind. In the book of Malachi, Elijah's return is prophesied as a harbinger of the coming of the Messiah. Elijah was bold, wild, strange, sometimes deadly, but bold and active in the world. You should all go home this day and Google Elijah and read every biblical reference that pops up, because it's an enormous story. So when Jesus, Moses, and Elijah appear together on the mountain, we're talking about a scene that carries a lot of freight. It places Jesus within the relationship of God and Israel, the historic relationship marked by Moses and the law, the covenant, the foundation. And it brings to life also that prophetic tradition of calling people back into relationship when they stray, of living out the implications of the law in the present. Now, some argue that Jesus, Moses, and Elijah, and the pronouncement of God that Jesus is his son and that he should be listened to, is in some sense a graduation, that Moses and Elijah no longer matter, and that Jesus is the only one that should be attended to, as it were. But I think this is nonsense. Because I think what Jesus is about is the integration of Moses and Elijah and humankind and the very life of God. Jesus isn't a claim of one thing against another. He's the reality of all of it, brought together in one perfect package. Jesus embodies the law and the tradition as revealed by Moses and Moses' work. But Jesus also embodies that prophetic tradition of calling people back into relationship when they've gone too far afield, living out the implications of the law and the prophets in the moment. So being a follower of Jesus is about the integration of relationship, foundation, and praxis. This relationship is a two-way street. It's a conversation. And if Jesus' life of devotion is any model, then the relationship is one where we're called to listen. We're called to listen to the scriptures, the commandments, and the tradition, because they ground us and direct us into that broad vision of living in a relationship with God. But we also have to listen to know when to act, when to be bold, when to recognize that we are far afield and that we're not living into the implications of the covenant, into the implications of the arrival of the Messiah, when we're not living into our side of the relationship that Jesus so fully and richly embodies. So friends, here we are, wondering what to do. This day, I tell you, it's not easy, but it's simple. We're called to seek a relationship with God. We're called to create room and space to listen and to love. And in light of that transformation that Jesus makes possible, we're called to be ready, to live boldly in the name of life.